We're kind of settling into this little summer run here, and I hope a lot of you are winning the summer, which is a lot of what we talked about throughout the month of May. And I want to just say thank you very much for being a place that is kind of about the health and well-being. We talk about body, soul, and spirit, and just kind of saying, okay, like how are we helping each other in every way? And I get to be on the receiving end of that as well, and I'm really grateful for it. Starting kind of this late June, like 29 or 30, July 1, somewhere in that window, I'm going to start a 12-week sabbatical. And for those of you who know Pastor Derek, who is our Middleville location pastor, he's kind of about almost through his 8-week sabbatical. And I'm really grateful for a place that several years ago an advisory team said, hey, let's actually make this policy that every 7 years, everybody that's on our staff in some way gets a sabbatical of some length in there. And it's really just a chance after kind of some shoulder to the plow of spiritual leadership over an extended period of time, just a chance to, a little bit pull back and just say, okay, how does God want to replenish this land and this part of the soil? And so I'm really, really grateful for that. So we'll be away kind of for those 12 weeks doing some regrouping, and I'm going to refer to a couple things about that and what we talk about today. But it's I'm just really grateful that we're a place that's been able to say, hey, let's be mindful of each other in all things. Like, how are we doing in our spirit, this part of us fully connected with God or fully pushing against God? How are we doing in our soul, our mind, will, and emotions? And how are we doing in our body? That, like, God gave us the gift of all three of those pieces, and so we want to steward them well. So I'm incredibly grateful. Later this week sometime, there'll be a little video that goes out about that too from a couple of people. And if you got questions, you just kind of wonder, again, like, hey, what's this biblical pattern? What's this biblical thing called a sabbatical? And why do we do that? And why did people let land rest? And why do people let leaders rest? Why is all that? You'll be able to kind of kick back a question if you have it or whatever, and that's great. We're happy to navigate those along the way. I just want to say thanks to you, and hey, we're looking forward to it, and just regrouping and healing up and some things. If you want, I'll just give you 4 words. If you wonder, like, hey, is there any way I can pray for you, which some of you have asked for, I'll just give you 4 words with no context, okay? So here they are. Here's the 4 words, right? Rest, recharge, heal, and hear. That's the only time I'm going to tell you. If you didn't get it, then you don't really love me. So, no, just kidding. I told you it was coming. I told you it's 4 words, and you didn't do anything. So it's like, no, it's rest, recharge, right? Rest, recharge is something we're just really mindful of in this season after this 8-year run and kind of what we've navigated in lots of different capacities as a church. And then just heal. There's some healing things we're navigating, and then just hearing God's voice and some clarity in some of those things. So rest, recharge, hear, and heal, kind of 4 themes. It seems like the Lord's pushed to the forefront of all of that. So really, really grateful for it. Hey, how many of you at some point in your life were fans of the game dodgeball? Like, remember that? Come on, somebody. Yeah, I loved dodgeball. Candidly, I still love dodgeball, and if there was a league for old people who wouldn't become mortally wounded playing dodgeball, I might be in, okay? I absolutely loved dodgeball. I know there are some places, where dodgeball is kind of outlawed now. And I don't want to, make any political statements, but that's stupid. And so, because it's a great game, like it's a great game. And I got a couple dodgeballs here, and I don't know if you knew this, but dodgeball actually got its origins like in Africa, and it wasn't really like, this is no joke, but it wasn't really dodgeball because they didn't have dodgeball. So what you played dodgeball with was large rocks or other heavy objects. No joke. I bet you they were really good. I bet you they were really good. I mean, if you want to talk about what is it that could help me be somebody like who in the intensity of a dodgeball game could like dive and dodge and duck and dip and all that goes with that, right? Then you would play in Africa with large stones and heavy objects, right? I want to show you a picture actually too. This is the largest dodgeball game in history, okay? You won't really be able to tell it there, and there's like some people even out of that shot, but 6,084 people participated in that dodgeball game. It was on the University of California, and they had kind of every year they would try and top their own Guinness Book of World Record. I feel like with that many people, it'd be really easy to cheat and just stay in. But somehow they actually manage this game every year and kind of continue to try and grow it and make it bigger. And I loved it, right? Because there's this dynamic of, right, if you could catch the ball when somebody threw it at you and you could get them out that way from the opposing team. But more often than not, for your own safety and staying in the game, you were literally trying to dodge something that was coming, or dip or duck or dive out of the way, right, to avoid all that goes with that, right? I mean, it was a great game. It is a great game. It is a great game. Here's the thing about dodgeball. I think more of us are playing dodgeball than really realize. That we're still involved in the game. It doesn't happen anymore to be played necessarily for most of us with a physical ball and a line in the middle of a court and some other targets and a really obvious enemy, but we are spending lots of our life dodging certain things and trying to dip and get under and duck and miss and dive to get out of the way of certain things in our life. Most of them, more times than not, come some form in something we would call packaged inside of pain, or the dodgeball of pain, or a discomfort, or a loss, or right. And what happens is we actually get really good in life at dodging these things. We get really good. Hey, my way of dealing with the pain or something that's coming, or the hardship or the betrayal, is I'm just really good at dodging it. And when it comes up and it starts to resurface a little bit, we dodge it, or we move out of the way, or we kind of feel like we let it go, or we let that emotion subside for the time being, or whatever it is, and we get on with our life. But here's the challenge. Every time we dodge it, dodgeballs have a way in real life of also somehow functioning a little bit like a boomerang. And it is still coming back around, it's coming again. And so then you have to be aware of it from another direction. All the while, there's other pain or disappointment or whatever it is still coming at us. We're really, really, really good at dodging it. The problem is that we actually are using energy to dodge that. Right? I mean, it takes energy to see it coming, or to feel it rising up, to move out of the way, let it pass by, suppress it, squash it down, whatever it is we're going to do, have an outbreak or whatever, and miss it. We use a lot of energy to do that. Now, some of us, we get so used to it, we've done it for so long, that we're used to actually living without that energy available for other things. But what if instead of using energy to dodge and duck and dive and dip out of the way of the pain, what if we could use the energy to go after the pain? What if we could use the energy to actually find some type of resolution and then redistribute the energy to other things that we would actually rather use the energy on? Right? What if we could redistribute the energy? This month, we're talking a lot about just some things I'm learning. I'm just sharing from my learnings, and I'm inviting you to learn with me a little bit. And this is an interesting one for me right now. I'm very open to the fact that I fairly consistently go to counseling, and I have a great counselor, and I'm in a little bit more of maybe a ramped up season of counseling right now as I navigate some things. I have a sabbatical coach prepping for this sabbatical, and they don't know each other. Those two have never met. They have no intersection in life other than the fact they both happen to be helping me, but they've never met each other. And what's really interesting is that in the span of about a week, both of them in different vocabulary got to this idea. Hey, John, with some of the things that you've navigated in your life, and some of maybe the pain that you've acknowledged, and some of the heartache, and some of the loss, and some of the grief, and some of the suffering, and some of the betrayal, and some of it, you've done really good at making really good mental/spiritual decisions. Really strong choices to forgive. And we talk about that a lot, right? Really strong choices to forgive. I try and be quick with the choice to forgive. Forgiveness is a choice. It's not a feeling. I don't wait for some feeling. I try and say, I'm going to choose to forgive. Okay? But what they both kind of acknowledged at the same time, and if it was one of them, I was going to be like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But it was both of them. And I'm like, whose idea was this? Say, hey, John, my paraphrase, they're nicer than this. You're really doing kind of a lousy job at how you navigate not just the mental decision you make in that, but some of the emotional consequence and price you live with in that. John, you should really kind of just be aware of some of what you're not letting heal while you keep using your energy to dodge these things that you think you have made the only decision necessary about them when you chose to forgive or whatever it is. And again, if one of them would have said it, I'd have been like, eh. When both of them said it, I'm like, I need new people to invest in me. Okay? Because candidly, when both of them said it, I knew, and part of what precipitated some of the conversation, and if I'm being very honest with you, part of what precipitated some of the recent conversation with my counselor initially was, hey, look, there are just certain things that I can't figure out why I'm not healing from. I know this. I know the steps. I know who God is. I know God's design. I know what God is wanting. I see where God has brought healing here and here and here. What is the barrier here? When I know it's God's heart and it doesn't seem to be moving like how it seems like it should, I don't want to question God's principle. I want to let God examine my heart. Because I know He wants to help in it. And so what came out of that is like, okay, let's take the energy that I'm spending dodging things. Let's redirect the energy so we could actually get some kind of resolution to these things. And I want to be careful, like, that you understand, you hear me say that we get some kind of resolution to the pain, not necessarily a return to something perfect. Okay? Like what I understand in this moment is that some of you are sitting with pain, and what I understand is that some of you, when we sing a song like Ruins, what some of you sit with, and I get it, is your loss or your betrayal or your hurt has been so bad, it's almost impossible to sing the words that you actually, God, you restore this. God, you don't restore all that's broken, because the loss has been too, I know. So it's not a return to this level of perfection, but what if we could get some resolution? And so I've had to start to experientially learn, and I want to invite some of you in this with me because I'm pretty convinced, as I start this learning, that I'm not the only one. I've had just a few conversations already with some people, and they're like, oh, and then they quit talking to me, but because it's a little bit challenging, right? But it's really good. And I want to talk about this practice that emerges in the Scriptures. People do it in the Scriptures. Jesus even does it. And it's a practice because it's something we do not because we're perfect at it, but because we're literally practicing it. We're experimenting with it. We're engaged in it. It's an ongoing practice. It's something we keep growing in. It's something we keep learning and keep experiencing more of it. And when I say the word, you're going to be, ooh, that's a little bit more of a churchy word than we would typically use around here. And it is. So let me give you the word, but then I want to give you a little context to it, okay? Part of what I'm learning to avoid dodging, to stop trying to get out of the way of, but to actually pay attention to and attune myself a little bit, it's this idea and this experience of lamenting, of lamenting. And let's just have a working definition of lamenting a little bit. Lamenting is like an appeal or even a complaint to God that comes out of our loss or our frustration or our confusion or our anger. Okay? And hear me on this right off the bat. Lamenting and grieving are not the same thing. Grieving, the broader picture of grieving, often needs to contain some lamenting, right? Like lamenting needs to be in it. It's part of the grief. Here's what I know about you if you've been alive for more than 4 or 5 months. You have pain. You have pain. You have very fallible parents, no matter how good their intentions are, right? Please give your parents the benefit of the doubt. Young people, please give your parents the benefit of the doubt. Please give them the benefit of the doubt. Please trust their motive. But it doesn't mean they're perfect. It doesn't mean they're perfect. Friends cause pain. Life causes pain. Loss causes pain. Premature death causes pain. There's pain. And part of this navigation is to understand, okay, now wait a second, while at least for me personally, while I'm making choices to forgive, while I'm making choices to put myself in healing environments, what I'm not making choices to do, like these are acts of the will first, is to say, you know what? God, this is what I really think. This is what I really think. God, this is what I really feel. This is what these laments, these are the prayers you find in the Bible that are loaded with, God, how long? What are you doing? Why haven't you? When will you? Why not? What are you thinking? It's about enemies externally. It's about enemies internally. It's about God's apparent delay and the confusion that we can have with that. And what's really funny is maybe you've been around church for a while, and so maybe you'll resonate with me. I've probably told hundreds of people to pray prayers like that. Maybe you, right? But when I slowed down long enough to realize it, and again, I'm getting this outside help, but like we need wisdom, right? We need wisdom of others, wisdom in the counsel of many, right? I'm like, there are some things in my life, especially over the last 7, 8 years, where it's like, oh, this is part of the reason. This is part of the reason that there are pockets where I'm not experiencing healing like I would think I should and like I know is God's intent. I want to look at one passage of Scripture. We could do a lot of passages of Scripture. There's actually a whole book called Lamentations. Lamentations in the Old Testament Bible is actually 5 different lamentations, and each one of them specific, each one of them uniquely written by the kind of on behalf of the nation of Israel. They're lamenting their sin, which sometimes that's what we need to lament, right? And the consequence of their sin, like they're kind of angry at themselves, they're a little frustrated with God, why'd you let me do this, whatever else, right? But I want to invite you to turn to the book of Psalms. Psalm chapter 6 is where we're going to be. Psalm chapter 6. Some scholars of the Bible would say that there's 150 Psalms and that over half of them contain at least some element of a lament, an appeal or a complaint towards God out of our frustration, anger, grief, loss, confusion, right? Some would say it's as many as 2/3. That's a lot. That's a lot. I want you to know that the one that we're reading today is written by a guy named David. And for those of us who are guys who would say, man, lamenting already sounds a little bit like what weak people do. And I get it, right? David did it, and David did it a lot. And David killed lions and bears without the aid of a gun. So when you're that tough, then we can talk differently about it, okay? But that's just David, right? Like he's using a slingshot to kill these things, and yet he's identifying deeply with pain and loss and grief and sometimes his own failure, definitely the betrayal of people around him, sometimes his own family disasters, sometimes which he added to and actually created. I mean, right? So David is a guy who knows all of the victory, right? He knows a nation that cheers him. He knows military victory. He knows, again, killing lions and bears, right? He knows incredible loss and grief and agony. And that incredible grief and loss and agony and disappointment and frustration, it comes out in these laments. And so we're just going to look at this one passage, and then we'll talk a little bit about what it looks like to actually do some lamenting. Psalm chapter 6, this is what it says. Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger, and please don't discipline me in your wrath. And that's David basically saying, God, here it comes. I'm getting ready to unload. I gotta get this out. God, have mercy on me, Lord. And then feel all of his words of lament. For I'm faint, I'm worn down by all of this. Heal me, Lord. For even my bones, the very fiber of my being, registers this agony that I'm in. There's no part of my body going unscathed by this thing. My soul is in deep anguish. How long, Lord? How long are you going to let this last? Don't you ever want to pray that? Maybe you have prayed that. God, when are you going to do something about this? Get me out of this, rescue me from this, solve that, move me through that. God, how long are you going to do it? Turn, Lord, and deliver me. Save me because of your unfailing love. Among the dead, no one's actually proclaiming your name. Who praises you from the grave? But I am worn out. I am worn out. And this has nothing to do with David's pace of life. It has everything to do with David's pain of life. Nothing to do with pace. Everything to do with pain. I am worn out from all my groaning. And sometimes we don't get worn out From our groaning, we get worn out. We don't know it. From our dodging what we should be groaning. Right? That's been me a little bit, right? It's like, oh, like, okay, wait, I gotta see this, right? All night long, I flood my bed with weeping. I drench my couch with tears. And maybe you say I'm not a crier. And so maybe all night for you, it's anger, it's frustration, it's turmoil, it's inner angst, it's inner frustration. It's the extreme element of fear, like all the way to the edges of your life because of what isn't resolving and what isn't healing. Maybe it's the full throttle, intense level of depression that haunts you in the night when you think, I can't live this way anymore. Maybe it's the taunting of guilt and shame because what you are really lamenting is the addiction or the vice that you don't want to still be stuck in. Maybe it's the disappointment with the fact that there are things in you that aren't healing that you know should be healing, and that is becoming the frustration. And so really what haunts you isn't maybe the tear, maybe it's the numbness that you didn't want, and you miss the vibrancy and the vitality. And so all night long, it could be tears, could be anger, could be depression, could be shame, could be numbness, and it just wears us out. My eyes even grow weak with sorrow. This has gone on so long and it's so heavy, God. I know that I'm not seeing life clearly. I know I'm looking through a little bit of a fog or a haze in front of me. Tons of us just ought to admit that. We've been living with fog and haze for years, right? Why? Because we're in real pain. Because there's real cause to our sorrow. These eyes are failing me because of all of these foes around me. It's just part of like one song, right? And you can hear it, right? You can hear the lament. You can hear the complaint. God, how long are you going to do this? God, why isn't this changing? God, what are we going to do with all my enemies? God, what are we going to do with all this sorrow? God, what are we going to do with the fact that when nobody else is seeing me, the only thing I have is tears? God, what are we going to do with that? Somewhere, God, doesn't this have to change a little bit? God, somewhere, doesn't there have to be some level of healing? If you are the healer, if you are the regrouper, if you are the restorer that you have said you were, then God, come on, doesn't there have to be? This is part of what I've been wrestling with, and it's part of what I'm learning. So how do we lament? Let's just understand it a few elements. First, number one, lamenting takes place in the context of a relationship. Lamenting happens in the context of a relationship. You kind of sense God from David and all throughout the story of Scriptures, God's taking it, right? Go ahead, let it rip. Go ahead. The best of relationships can take that. You know, just go ahead. For some of you, the beauty is that your relationship with God might begin here. Your first prayer might be a lament. And that's okay. In fact, it'd probably be one of the most amazing things ever. Your first conversation with God might be a lament. Your first conversation might be a why aren't you? Why haven't you? Why did you let? For some of you, your first conversation in years might be a lament. That's okay. God's good with that. He understands that relationships have all of the emotions, all of the losses, all of the degrees, right? And again, remember, some of us, we've been forgiving things for 30 and 40 and 50 years. The question becomes like, have we honestly lamented them? Are there layers of healing we're leaving on the table? And this lamenting begins in the context of relationship. And then lamenting always expands the relationship. It always expands the relationship. Every time, because here's the thing, God's good with it. God can take the lament. In fact, God even encourages it. That's why these laments are all throughout the story of God in the Scripture with humanity, right? Even Jesus laments. Jesus. Okay? Even Jesus laments. And so because God's like okay with it and even inviting it because he knows the trauma and the pains and the losses of life, he does always meet these things with compassion. Like he never runs from our lament. God never hears the lament and runs the other way and says, no, we don't do that. We don't do that's not how we do it. While we might be dodging the opportunity to do it, God never dodges the lament when it's in his direction. He's always there. He'll always take it. And here's the thing. Every time, in any relationship, every time new vulnerability or honesty is met with new compassion, the relationship deepens. Every time. Every time in any relationship that new vulnerability or new honesty is met with new compassion, side word to those of you who've been following for Jesus a long time, you haven't tapped out God's compassion yet. You'll always be discovering more of it. It's a beautiful thing, right? But every time there's new vulnerability or honesty that is met with new compassion, it's like a whole new layer of goodness gets added. Whole new layer of goodness. Anybody like Oreos? Oreos? The rest of you just either nuts or in the wrong building. But okay, and some of us in our family eat gluten-free. There's even gluten-free Oreos, and they're legit, okay? They're it's one of the things that actually taste things. And of course, if you like Oreos, what you understand is there are double-stuffed Oreos. Can I get a witness, somebody?
Yes.
Yeah. We've been to church now, okay? They're like double-stuffed Oreos, right? Here's what this whole lamenting thing, and expands the context of relationship, right? Is that every time we lament, and there's this new layer of vulnerability and honesty on our part that's met with a new layer of compassion on God's part back to us, it would almost be like if the double stuff became a triple stuff. Let it be so, Lord. Let it be so. Okay, let it be so. Right? And then after that, there'd be a quadruple stuff. Right? There's a new layer of goodness that comes. The lamenting always expands the relationship somehow. Because that's God's most prized possession is you. It's you. And I'm in this learning thing of oh, man, God doesn't just give me the power to choose forgiveness. And forgiveness opens the door to so much healing. But then another door to a whole new wave of healing is this lamenting thing. It's like God's gift to us in this brokenness and this fallenness, and where there's tragedy and loss and trauma and unnecessary words and betrayals. And it's incredible. And so lamenting is part of healing. It's in the relationship, it expands the relationship, but it is part of healing. It is part of healing. There are some things that we lament. There's some things that you lament if you will let yourself. There are some things that I lament that in this world, on this earth, they're not coming back. We don't get to go back in time and unwind them somehow, right? Which is part of why we're so in need of healing. And while lamenting won't bring every loss back and remove every betrayal or every hurt or every disappointment, what it will open the door to is more of his healing. There's so much further just on that one piece we could go. And this week, I want to just send out a little further thought on this. And so if you follow us anywhere, if you want to get Journey emails, go to our website and you can sign up there. It'll come in email, or follow us on Instagram or Facebook or whatever else. And there'll just be a little bit of an expanded thought on this one, because there's so much in there about how God could use lamenting in part as a gift to bring us healing. And part of the healing is that when we lament inside the context of this relationship, and then the relationship is expanding, part of the healing is that lamenting, it can reveal what you didn't actually know you were carrying. And this is where lamenting, if I'm just putting all my cards on the table, this is where lamenting can get sticky, okay? I'm telling you should do it, but can I have just a moment of honesty with you? So again, I'm a counselor and sabbatical coach, two different people, and they talked me into this thing, right? And so I'm okay, I'm not literally going to practice lamenting. I'm 4 or 5 minutes. I'm not lamenting for an hour, whatever else, and I kind of go through this practice of lamenting. I'll talk about that a little more in a second. And then a couple days later, I have to move an appointment with my counselor or whatever, and so I I text him and I'm like, hey, I had to move because of this or whatever. And then I sent him another text right after that. And I hope this is okay, but I just said, and by the way, lamenting sucks. Lamenting sucks. Yeah. He didn't tell me I needed to find a new counselor or anything. I mean, we're still good. I've known him since then, right? And lamenting's hard because why? Because we're so used to dodging it that then we grab the energy and we actually face what's coming and we grab a hold of it. We're grabbing a hold of something that is consistently causing us pain or confusion or frustration or anger, even when we think we're dodging it and getting out of the way of it. And so part of what it is in my first couple of just practices of lamenting, and again, we're trying to navigate really specific things that over the last several years have kind of like built up on me, and sometimes I haven't had the time to navigate it or haven't seen the need to navigate it or whatever else or thought it was done. And this is really sobering because what I got in there, like a little ways into lament, I was like, yeah, God, this and this and this and this hurts and that hurt and this, that, and I'm disappointed by that, and I wish this could have been different, and I wish we hadn't lost this, or I don't know, whatever it is, right? And before I'm very far in, what I realize I'm communicating to God over and over and over again is how just ripping mad I am. I'm like, man, I am a lot more angry than I thought. Wow. Like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? It's like, but wait, all this time I've been spending like dodging things and moving things. Again, they keep coming. And probably every time they come, they're adding to anger that I didn't even know I had. What's crazy about lamenting is that it can be so healing. And part of how it's healing is that it's revealing. Part of what God uses in the lamenting to bring healing is that he brings some revealing of, there's the thing we're actually trying to heal. Part of why this isn't healing is because you're trying to heal the wrong thing. You're trying to heal a surface thing that you've been using as flexibility to get out of the way of this thing all the time, when really what's below that is the thing we want to get to. It will reveal what you didn't know you were carrying. And I'm really honest with you today. In the moment, literally, I'm thinking, I don't like this. I don't think I want to do this again. I need a new counselor. Okay, I'm all those things in the moment. But I'm telling you, it's only a few minutes later. I'm like, sheesh, that's helpful to see. Just this seeing it became unbelievably freeing. I'm like, I haven't even been dodging the right thing. It's not a wonder I feel like I keep getting hit. I haven't even been dodging the right thing. I'm not even getting out of the way of the right stuff. And it's within moments that not everything is resolved, but there's like this clarity. And when that gets revealed, that's when the compassion of Jesus becomes all of a sudden fresh again. He's like, I know. John, I know. It caught me off guard. It didn't catch him off guard. I know. That's why I'm inviting you into this, so that we could see this together, and now we can make a move. Now we can actually go after the right thing. And it's in the context of this relationship, and now all of a sudden the relationship expanding because now there's some healing because of what I'm experiencing in the revealing in. Right? It's just part of what I'm learning. There's more, right? But that's part of my learning in it. And I want to invite you into it, but before I do, I want to show you something else. That's just, you can see at the end of this psalm, and you see it over and over again. Let's go back to the psalm a little bit, right? Just verses 8, 9, and 10. It's a few simple little lines, right? It says this, still David, again, in this frustration, right? There's a little shift right here, though. He says, away from me, all you who do evil. The Lord has heard my weeping. The Lord has heard my lamenting. Now, understand that in that one moment, nothing around David has changed. All the enemies are still the same. All the foes are still the same. All the people are still the same. It's still the same day that he started the psalm on, probably, right? All of those things are still the same. But do you see, there's all of a sudden, there's this subtle shift from, God, what in the world are you doing, to, hey, All you things that I've been dodging, I want you to get away from me because it's the Lord who has heard my cry for mercy. The Lord is accepting my prayer and my lamenting. All my enemies will one day eventually be overwhelmed with their own shame and their own anguish, and they will turn back and be put to shame. Do you notice, like they will be? A lot of times we read will be in the Bible and we think, well, that must be right now. Will be is at some point. We're a lot better in the Bible if we read will be as eventually. Okay, eventually. But here's so many times, so many laments. In fact, some would say that out of all the Psalms that contain a lament, all but 2 have this characteristic, and it's that they often end with some expression of trust. Some expression of trust. My enemy is eventually going to turn back. My God has heard my prayer. My God has heard, and eventually the tide is turning. Eventually the tide is turning. And David all of a sudden he's not dodging anymore. He's grabbed a hold of this thing. He's just held it up in front of the Lord and just said, God, this is too much. This is too long. What are you doing? When are you coming through? Look at me. And he lets this thing out, and God is so compassionate and gracious in receiving it that suddenly David just has this subtle shift. None of this is perfectly resolved yet. We want resolution. At least I do. I want resolution. I want something to be returned. I want something to be restored perfectly. I want to go back 10 years. I want to, whatever it is, right? We want resolution so bad. But what we see from David and what I'm learning in this is long before there's revolution, the unloading of this thing to a God who gives compassion, who adds another layer to the double-stuffed Oreo. Just enough response to allow us to say, okay, now look, God heard that. And did you catch that one line? God accepted that. God accepted that. And there's going to be one day that all this stuff will be done. We'll be done. But even until that one day fully comes, I am back on a path of healing, no matter how slow or fast it might be. No matter how slow or fast it might be. And part of what I'm learning in this, and part of what I want to invite you to learn with me, part of what I want to invite you to experience with me, I hope you will, is that when we lament, this the very practice of lamenting, it brings new depth to our relationship with God and new healing to our soul. Lamenting brings it brings new depth. Some of us, we're so stuck kind of spiritually. We're just kind of caught in this quagmire moment. And some of it is we're not lamenting, man. Some of us got years of baggage. And we carry it and we drag it around. And sometimes everybody knows it but us. And when we see it and we're willing to acknowledge it and we lament, God always responds with this compassion, not this perfect resolution in the moment, but this compassion, and it adds new depth to the relationship, and that new depth always brings new healing. See, listen. Some of us, some of us have no problem being very well acquainted with our pain. We are not denying it. We are not living in any sense of denial there. But we might be dodging the wrong thing. Some of us, we're living in denial. We think we're strong enough that doesn't bother me. I just push that down. I've moved on. Look, part of how I got here was thinking that on some things. Man, I made a great choice to forgive. I'm good. Let's go. Let's move. Let's go. Dodge. Oh, I'll make that choice. Forgive. Dodge. Man, I'm done with that. That's done. I'm not giving that any more space. I'm done with that, right? And there are some good decisions to be made in that. But sometimes those good decisions need the help of a good decision to lament. Look, some of us, we're in this weird denial. The strongest people in the scriptures, the most heroic forces in the scriptures including Jesus, lamented. They just let stuff out, man. Here we go. Through all of their personalities and all these wirings that God had given them, but lamenting is this common theme. Because sin has brought tons of brokenness and junk into the world. And I want to ask you if you would just join me today in lamenting. And saying, God, I got an appeal. If you're really bold, just say it. God, I got a complaint. Is there a complaint department, God? Because I got one. I got a complaint. And God, my complaint, honestly, I'm not sure if it's coming from frustration, confusion, loss, agony, anger. But God, I got a complaint. And I want to let you know what it is. I want to let you know what it is. I don't want to just tell you, if you'll start that way, it feels a little awkward if you've never done it before. Just from my own experience, it feels a little awkward. But I'm just telling you, if you'll start that way, I think God will just give you a sense of him sitting down, just looking you right in the eye and saying, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready. I know you've had this one for a while. I'm ready. Let's do this. They just stare right back. Okay. And there'll be this real openness. You know how you can talk to people sometimes and you're like, they don't really want to be talking to me. And you talk to people other times and they're like, I think they actually want to know what I have to say. The second one's the Lord right here. He's like, he's ready. And he's just hoping you'll be super honest. He's just hoping. He's just hoping we'll like be very candid and raw. I want to invite you to do it. Even in this minute, I want to give you a minute. Maybe two, just to do it right now. And some of you, you're journalers, and you've been taking notes all morning, whatever else, and I love that. That's awesome. That's me too, right? And I want to invite you just to get to a blank page somewhere, and I want to invite you to, some of you, you need to get a phone real quick. You just need to get your phone out, and yes, the pastor's telling you to do it in church. Or if you're already on your phone, close your Facebook app and get over here for a second. Like, open a blank note or something like that, or close the gram, whatever you've been on, okay? Shut that down, and just get a blank note out. And just start to lament. Just start it. God, I got a complaint. God, I just this. And it's okay. Like, let it be as raw and as crusty and broken as it needs to be. Some of you, it's just a bow ahead and close eyes. And you need to let your heart scream a little bit. You need to let your heart groan a little bit. You need to let your heart, you need to let what connects you next with God be your agony. Not a polished statement. It needs to be your agony. And so I just want to give you a minute to sit. I know, like this, like if you were here last week, this is the complete opposite. Last week, was learning about celebration. Can we go back? Okay, but now we're talking about lamenting, right? Let's just take a minute, maybe two. And I want to let you sit in it. And just practice the appeal or the complaint. Just try it. Right there in your seat. I'm just done for a minute. You and the Lord.